So we're going to continue today on our RE series, and my word is ready. And today we're going to be in Ephesians. And so if you're unfamiliar with the book of Ephesians, I invite you to get to know it pretty well. It has a lot of things in there that we can relate to today as Christians and things that we would hope for our life, including things like hope and unity and being grateful and offering forgiveness to one another. Paul wrote this when he was in prison the first time by the Romans. And I'm going to caution you when you read this that there's a whole big block about being grateful to your master if you are a slave. What this is not saying, please do not read this at face value. I could do a whole sermon series on what slavery meant in the Bible. So please don't think that you are getting a green light or that the Bible affirms slavery, okay? So please do me a favor there. But like I said with the ready, I'm kind of a nerd, right? So what did I do the first thing when I got ready as my word? Hey, let's look that up. Let's see what that actually means. And so when I went to dictionary.com, I got a couple different definitions, both adjectives and one verb translation. As an adjective, in a suitable state for an activity, action, or situation, fully prepared. Really, are you? Me too. Of a thing made suitable and available for immediate use, in need of or having a desire for, in such a condition as to be likely to do something, easily available or obtained, within reach, or immediate, quick, or prompt. And then the verb definition of this is prepare someone or something for an activity or a purpose. So, of course, all of you probably know this, but if you don't, you're about to. I'm in the Army. And don't do the math when I say this. I have 19 years of service, so I've been doing this for a little bit. Thank you. And so being in the Army, the first thing I thought about when I read all those definitions is I was like, holy crap, that's a big word in the Army. We plan for this long to execute something takes this much time. And we do all this over here, and that's a lot of preparation because over here is a challenge or an event. And not only do we have to come to this event, we have to arrive with a mindset that we can successfully navigate and come out on top in whatever this challenge or event is. And then the Army has this beautiful thing that they like to call readiness, which is our way that we get prepared to accomplish whatever assignment comes at us. And so at the unit level, this is equipment, training, manning, logistics, all kinds of other stuff, but then there's also an individual readiness that's required by each individual service member. And so for me, that looks like specialized training, updating of my personnel documents, and being medically ready, medically fit to go and do whatever. And once you align all these special things, you get a green light. So your readiness color is green. So imagine a stoplight with green, amber, red. And once you're green, on paper, Army says you're ready to go. You are now a fully ready person to be part of Army's fighting force. Readiness, defined by dictionary.com, says the state of being fully prepared for something. And I'm going to tell you a time when I had that readiness score green and I was not prepared for what the Army was about to ask me to do. So let's go back a long time. I was a fairly new soldier. This was December 12th of 2003. I was at work at a general contractor's office, and it was a Friday morning, about 10 a.m., 10:15 or so, and I get a call that's going to change my life. And it's my first sergeant. He's like, McKimmie, top. I was like, yes, first sergeant? If anybody's a veteran, they know exactly that's like how first sergeants talk. And I said, yeah, first sergeant, what's up? And he's like, when Captain Chappell calls you in a minute, I need you to act surprised, but you've been requested by the 321st. I was like, okay. What does that mean? He's like, Captain Chappell will have all the details for you. I'll see you when you get here. I was like, oh, what does that mean? Okay, and so I'm in a mild panic. Like, I got concert tickets for tonight. Like, what am I going to do with this? And so 5 minutes later, phone rings, and it's Captain Chappell, and he says, and I'll never forget, this man is so kind and so collected and so the antithesis of the first sergeant, which was very knife-handy and direct, and he was very kind. So when I heard this tone in his voice, I knew he was serious. And he said, Specialist McKimmie. And I said, yes, sir. He was Captain Chappell. You are hereby ordered to active duty in direct support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. You have 3 hours to report to the Armory. I will fax over your orders to your employer shortly. What are your questions? And I was like, 3 hours? And he said, yes. I said, okay, I'll be there. And I hung up the phone, and I was in a daze, and I was like, what just happened? This isn't my unit. This is a unit I just spent all week getting ready. I was helping them do their paperwork. I was preparing their wills and their powers of attorney and updating their life insurance, and I was doing all those things for them. That wasn't me. I was over here helping them get ready. I wasn't ready. And so in a daze, I had kind of zoned out thinking about everything that might be happening in what is to come for me. And I went into my boss, who was a Vietnam veteran, and I said, hey, Mario, I just got the call. And he's like, oh, I got my letter in the mail. And I said, well, I just got a phone call from my commander, and they need me. And he said, okay, how do we help you? And I said, I don't know. My orders will be coming across the fax machine, but I got to go. And he said, okay. And I said, I'm not coming back. Just so you know, I'm not coming back to work anytime soon. So don't think I'm just going to go, check in, come back. I'm gone. Like, I'm not coming back anytime soon. And he said, okay. And then I kind of walked around, and I'm by this point, I'm crying. And I'm walking around the office, and I'm really just trying to be in execute mode to say, hey, here's a list of things, coworkers, that I didn't get done today, and I need you to do that because I'm out. And they were all kind of standing around going, well, what do you mean? You're not. What do you mean? Like, you went and helped them, but now you get to stay. And I said, no, I don't. I have to go, and I'll see y'all later. And so I packed up my desk, and I was out the door by 11 o'clock, and I got to the Armory that day about 1 p.m. So fast forward 36 to 40 hours later, I was on a plane, and I left Reno. Sunday morning, 6 a.m., I left Reno. We got on a plane to Fort Lewis, Washington, where we then spent 3 months getting ready. And when I talk about the mobilization process, and Drew, you can attest to this was probably your life all the time. Drew's my fellow combat veteran over there. It was 6 to 7 days a week of nonstop training that was all geared and designed to prepare us for this mobilization. And a lot of this training I needed. I was very grateful that I got a lot of this training because it enabled me to do what I needed to do. But then there was other things that I had to learn, and thank goodness I didn't have to learn, or I didn't have to use them, like how to stab myself in the leg with an atropine injection, just in case I got exposed to nerve gas. And I also didn't have to apply a tourniquet to anybody who had life-threatening bleeding happening. So thank goodness there was a few things that I didn't actually need. But even after all that training, even after 3 months of getting all the certifications, having all of the credentials, and being signed off on paper as my green light, I still did not feel ready. I remember sitting on the tarmac at the airport, and it wasn't an airport, it was an airfield at Joint Base Lewis McChord, and I was sitting there with my buddy Kyle, and he was one of my best friends, and I'm trying to put on a brave face because it says I'm green, I need to go, and I'm going whether I like it or not, so I just might as well fake it till I make it. And he saw right through it, and he says to me, it's okay. He's like, I'm scared too, it's all right. He's like, you got this. I'm like, okay. And then he put his arm around me, and we grabbed all of our stuff, and we got on that plane. That was 16 years ago yesterday. So then we fast forward 13 months, and I'm on my way back home, and it begins to hit me what I've just been through. Because since I got on that plane, I was in execute mode. You just go through, and you have your mission, and you do it. And there wasn't a lot of room for interpretation or to dwell or to be sad or to any of that stuff. You was just go and do your job. And as I'm on my way home, I'm thinking about what it is that we've all been through. Because in those moments, I was surrounded by 200,000 other people doing the exact same thing that I was doing. Why am I special, different, set apart? I wasn't. I was doing exactly what I was supposed to do, just like everybody else. And it's really hard to think about the fact that not only was I making history, I was participating in it. I was part of the largest troop rotation into combat since World War II. But I didn't see it that way because I was part of 200,000 other people doing the same thing. And the things that all of you saw on TV as part of iconic war symbols had become just a regular part of my daily landscape. And it was really hard for me to understand exactly what I had just experienced. And at this point, after all of that, I felt like coming home was going to be the easy part. I felt like everything that I had been prepared to do, all the hard stuff, all the training, that's got to be behind me. But I'm going to tell you that the biggest challenge was in front of me. And I returned from that deployment a very different person. And if you ask me all those things that made me different, I was very proud of. I was confident that I could survive in extremely adverse conditions. I had proven that. In a time when not everybody came home, I did. And I attested a small bit of that to the fact that I had trusted in my training. I was also really proud of my service, and so if I was different, I got to be. I earned it. And the Army, that whole time, had equipped me for everything I needed then. What do you know? When I left on that tarmac that day, I was ready, but I didn't think so. So then, when I got back, I returned home, and I didn't recognize my life. I was not welcome back at the job that I had left 16 months earlier. 3 of my closest friends had moved away. The man that I was casually dating had moved on while I was gone, and the kicker is that the day I landed in Reno, my father was diagnosed with stage 4 terminal stomach cancer. So this life seemed not so great, and I would have chosen to go back to combat any day. And looking back, it's really sad for me to even think about the idea that I did not even once think that I could turn to God for any of this. I had become a self-reliant warfighter in survival mode so deeply ingrained in me that I thought my option was to suck it up and drive on. And this is not to say that I was dismissing or discounting that God was there, because he was. I just wasn't spiritually mature enough to know that I could turn to him for anything. How is God going to possibly understand my combat experience? How is he possibly going to understand that my dad's sick? How is he possibly going to understand this unique combination of my darkness? How is he going to understand that? Nobody's going to understand it. And thinking back, if somebody had said to me, oh, just give it to God, I would have felt incredibly discounted, and that my problems I was facing were minimized by that person, and I know that God knew that. And so I can see now that I wasn't alone in that time, but I'm going to tell you, I felt extremely isolated and incredibly lonely. And it's okay, because now hindsight's always 20/20, right? I can see now that God was working on me. He allowed me to proceed down that very, very dark path, and all the while, he was revealing himself to me in little pieces as I needed it. He was getting me ready in my time and in the way that he knew I needed. And one of those ways that God reveals himself to me is through the people that he puts in my life, and he has arranged very strategic people throughout the way to help me. And one such person is an amazing Marine named Daniel Egbert. He's now a filmmaker, and he's a fellow at American Film Institute. And Daniel he's a tough Marine, but he's got a soft heart. And he has the best analogy for the darkness that people carry. And he says everybody has this emotional box. And when you're having emotions, they go in your box, and your box gets full. And when your box is full, it starts to overflow, and that's when you're crying, that's when you're breaking down, that's when you're angry, and that's when you lose control of your emotions, is when your box gets full. Daniel reassured me that every veteran's box is always half full. So it doesn't take a lot for it to overflow. And the things that are in the bottom of that box, you don't want to relive so that you can unpack them and let them go. And when Daniel expressed this analogy to me, I realized that I had half a box full of residual darkness that I had yet to let go. And I had been living my life in the bottom half of that box, a very, very dark place, for the better part of a decade, and I didn't even know it. But then, once I realized where I was, I started digging. And those places weren't pretty, but I knew I had to keep digging, because I knew I had to get out of this really, really awful place that I had no idea had such a stronghold on me. You want to talk about God working in a way that you can't understand, and you can't understand your suffering and your hurt? I'm studying to be an Army chaplain, folks. Who do you think I'm ministering to now? The broken, who are stuck in their dark places, who think that they just have to suck it up and drive on. And don't get me wrong, I was scared for God to see what was in that box because I knew what was there and I didn't want to look at it myself. And I was like, please, God, don't. Just please don't look in there. Don't. Let that be mine, and let's work on the other stuff. He knows what's in there. You can try to hide your dark places all you want, but he knows. It's very unlikely he's going to seeing something in there that's going to change how he views you. And as I got deeper into this box, God just continued to reveal how amazing he is. So now let's go to Ephesians chapter 2. And we've got Sky Bible up here, but we also have Bibles in the back if you want one. Pull it out on your phone, however you want, or you can just sit and watch the show. So Ephesians 2, verses 4 through 10. But because of his great love for us, God, who is rich in mercy, made us alive with Christ, even when we were dead in transgressions. It is by grace you have been saved. And God raises us up with Christ and seated us with him in the heavenly realms of Jesus Christ, in order that in the coming ages he might show the incomparable riches of his grace expressed in his kindness to us in Jesus Christ. For it is by grace that you have been saved through faith. And this is not from yourselves. It is a gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. For we are God's handiwork, created in Jesus Christ to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. By the way, I got this really cool bookmark from my buddy Drew today. Thank you, my friend. What's marinating on that passage for you? What's talking to you about that? For me, that tells me that it doesn't matter if I'm ready. God is always ready. He already did all the hard work. You might remember this amazing story about Jesus Christ. He already did that work. And remember what I said about how the Army plans for this? What do you think God did over here for you for this? He did all the hard work. And last week, Pastor David mentioned that God isn't just waiting in some church somewhere so that you can go and meet him. He's already found you. He already knows you. He's already met you where you are, and he's ready for you. I was a suffering and broken warfighter. Yet I was able to find meaning in that suffering. Took a while, but I found it in being called to ministry. Talk about showing the incomparable riches of his grace. For it is by his grace that you are saved through faith. He made a recipe of my heartache and my darkness as a veteran, mixed it with his love and grace, and produced somebody called to serve him. And now, I really want you guys to think about those dark places that you're afraid to go in your own life. Because we all have them. And some might be deeper than others. Some might smell bad or have other people there that we don't really necessarily want to deal with. But it doesn't matter what it looks like. It can be addiction. It can be brokenness. It can be anything else that you define as your darkness. Because, by the way, nobody else gets to define your darkness but you. The only thing that is figured out for you is who brings light to it. But also, once you've identified this space, I want you to think about what's preventing you from letting God into that space. No, I can't let God have control over that part of my life. That part's mine. No, I don't need God, I've got this. To quote Pastor David's famous words that changed his life, how's that working for you? You got this? Okay, yeah, so did I. That's a joke. Are you afraid of being judged? Let's be honest. We come to church, and sometimes there's people in church who want you to wear your sin like a sandwich board. If that's happening here, let me know. I've said that always. It's not a thing. We don't do that here. As Nazarenes, we believe in the moment that you are simultaneously justified from your sin, your heart is made clean in Jesus, and you are adopted as a child of God. These aren't things that we made up because they sound cool or they make us feel good. These are things that are documented as the inspired Word of God within the greatest story of all time. You may have heard of it. It's called the Bible. We're not making this up to sound awesome. It's the truth, and He gave it to us. A few weeks ago during communion, I had talked to all of you about the difference between being welcome somewhere and belonging. Think about that, for those of you who weren't here. Being welcome means, yes, you can walk through the door, but belonging means that as you arrive, you are part of the family. So when we think about this passage with Ephesians, we know that God has done the work already for you. He's removed all your guilt and all your shame. And regardless of what society would like you to believe about your past or what you've experienced and who you are at your soul, God knows who you are. He's done all the hard work. We've been released from all of that. God and Jesus are enough for that. There's no checklist theology around here. If you believe, you are set free. Our faith in Him provides this justification, regeneration, and adoption. Nothing else. Let's be clear. Nothing else gives that to you. Nobody in church gives that to you. I don't give that to you. Nothing gives that to you but God, and He already gave it to you. Saying if I wanted to go somewhere else, but I'm not gonna because we're getting close to time. Is there anybody here who has felt welcome by God but is still afraid? Because you're afraid you won't belong once you meet Him there. I assure you that He is ready for you, and He has made a place for you. You are welcome. You belong just as you are. And the more broken you are, good for you. Guess what? That's going to show and magnify the glory of God's grace even that much more. Forgiveness and justification are no easy feats. Courage is not for cowards, right? So have the courage to step up and become part of God's kingdom because you're already welcome here, and He cannot wait for that day and that moment and that time that you're ready to fully give over. It's hard. It's really hard. It's scary. What if He doesn't like me once He sees all this? The hard part is admitting it to yourself because He already knows. I was so afraid. It's like, God, you can't possibly call me to be a chaplain. You are out of your mind. The first 3 people who told me this, who, by the way, did not know each other, I said some cuss words to them about their mental state and their sanity and the possibility that they might be drunk. Stuff I will not say here today. And that was me being broken. That was me being ashamed of who I was, that God couldn't possibly call such a broken warfighter to serve others. What did I have that somebody else didn't have? I had a calling of God on my heart to go and help those who were suffering the same way that I was. He gave me everything I needed to become whole in Him. At this time, I'd like to ask the worship team to come back up. And now is the time that we're going to take communion. We purposely moved it from the middle of the service to now because I felt it was appropriate. And by the way, I'm the pastor. I'm the boss of the service today. No, David was very gracious and allowed me to move this because this is what we talk about with communion, right? And Jesus set the table for us, right? Communion is the way that we can invite God and Jesus into all those dark places in our life. It is the place where we can take time and get right with him and accept his invitation to the table. And here at VCF, we do communion in two ways. We're going to do this together as a body of believers, but I want to invite you to take the time to become an individual where this is concerned and get right with God in ways that you need to. There's no prerequisite for communion other than you believe. You don't have to be a member. You don't have to be baptized. We believe that if you believe, you are welcome at this table. Not only are you welcome, but you belong. So, as we get ready to take communion, I want us to look back at those adjectives that I described earlier, and I'm going to reframe them just a little bit. I am fully prepared to receive God's grace. God's grace is suitable and available for immediate use. I am in need of God's grace. God's grace is easily available and within reach. And finally, God has prepared me for his grace. So as we take communion, I'll pray us out, and the ushers will distribute the communion. But take this time to reflect on your dark places and invite Jesus into your heart to fill those dark places with his light. Lord, thank you so much for this day and for always being ready. Lord, put it on the hearts of everyone here today how much you love them, and remind them of everything you've done in preparation for them to be ready. Lord, may we use this time of communion to become one with you as we do this in remembrance of Jesus, who gave his life so that we may become whole in you. It is in your Son's precious name I pray.